Codependent no more. My first encounter with codependence occurred in the early 1960s. This was before people, tormented by other people's behavior, were called codependents, and it was before people addicted to alcohol and other drugs were labeled chemically dependent. Although I didn't know what codependents were, I usually knew who they were. As an alcoholic and addict, I stormed through life helping create them. Codependents were a necessary nuisance. They were hostile, controlling, manipulative, indirect, guilt-producing, difficult to communicate with, generally disagreeable, sometimes downright hateful, and a hindrance to my compulsion to get high. They hollered at me, hid my pills, made nasty faces at me, poured my alcohol down the sink, and tried to keep me from getting more drugs. But they were always there, ready to rescue me from self-created disasters. The codependents in my life didn't understand me, and the misunderstanding was mutual. Until recently, many counselors didn't know what to do to help codependents. Sometimes codependents were blamed. Sometimes they were ignored. Sometimes they were expected to magically shape up, an archaic attitude that hasn't worked with alcoholics and doesn't help codependents either. Rarely were codependents treated as individuals who needed help to get better. Rarely were they given a personalized recovery program for their problems and their pain. Yet, by its nature, alcoholism and other compulsive disorders turn everyone affected by the illness into victims, people who need help, even if they aren't drinking, using other drugs, gambling, or overeating. That's why I wrote the book Codependent No More. It grew out of my research, my personal and professional experiences, and my passion for the subject. This tape is based on my book. It isn't about how you can help your alcoholic or troubled person, although if you get better, his or her chance of recovery improves too. There are plenty of good books on how to help the alcoholic. This tape is about your most important and probably most neglected responsibility, taking care of yourself. It's about what you can do to start feeling better. Although this is a self-help, how-to tape, please remember it's not a cookbook for mental health. Each person is unique, each situation is unique. Try to tap into your own healing process. That may include seeking professional help, attending self-help groups such as Al-Anon, and calling on the assistance of a power greater than yourself. Now, let's get down to basics. First of all, what is codependency and who is affected by it? Perhaps some examples would be helpful at this point. Our first example is Marlis. Now in her 40s, Marlis is an attractive woman when she takes care of herself. Most of the time, however, she's busy taking care of her 5 children and her husband, who is a recovering alcoholic.
I devote my life to making them happy, but I don't seem to succeed. Usually, I feel angry and unappreciated for my efforts, and my family feels angry at me. Yeah, well, I have sex with my husband whenever he wants, regardless of how I feel. I spend too much of the family's budget on toys and clothing for the children, whatever they want. I chauffeur, read to, cook for, clean for, cuddle, and coddle those around me. But nobody gives anything back to me. Most of the time they don't even say thank you. I resent constantly giving to people in my life. I resent how my family and their needs control my life. I chose nursing as a profession, and I often resent that, too. I feel guilty when I don't do what's asked of me. I feel guilty when I don't live up to my standards for a wife and a mother. I feel guilty when I don't live up to other people's standards for me. I just plain feel guilty. In fact, I schedule my day and priorities according to guilt.
Does endlessly taking care of other people, resenting it, and expecting nothing in return mean Marlis is a good wife and mother? Or could it mean Marlis is codependent? Then there was Randall. Randall was a chemical dependency counselor and a recovering alcoholic with several years of sobriety when he found himself having troubles. Randall was also an adult child of an alcoholic. His father and 3 brothers were alcoholics. Randall is an intelligent, sensitive man who enjoys his work.
My problem is that I spend most of my time, on and off the job, worrying about other people and their problems. Sometimes I feel angry with my alcoholic patients for creating the problems I feel obligated to solve. Sometimes I feel upset because people, not necessarily alcoholics, behaved in particular ways. I feel guilty about, sorry for, and used by people. Rarely, however, do I feel close to them. Rarely do I have fun.
For many years, Randall believed it was his duty to worry about people and get involved in their problems. He called his behavior kindness, he called it concern, he called it love, and sometimes he called it righteous indignation. Now, after getting help for his problem, he calls it codependency. Now, let's look at Alyssa. Alyssa, the mother of 2 teenagers, worked part-time at a mental health organization when she went to a family counselor. She went to counseling because her oldest child, a 14-year-old boy, was constantly causing problems. He ran away, broke curfew, skipped school, disobeyed other family rules, and generally did whatever he wanted whenever he wanted. This is what Alyssa told the counselor.
This child is driving me crazy. I mean it. I'm worried sick. Some days I'm so depressed and troubled I can't get out of bed. I have placed my son in treatment 3 times, put him in 2 different foster homes, and dragged the whole family from counselor to counselor. I've tried other techniques, too. I've threatened, I've cried, I've hollered, I've begged. I have gotten tough, I've called the police. I've tried gentleness and forgiveness. I have even tried ignoring his inappropriate behavior. I've locked him out. I've traveled halfway across the state to bring him home after he ran away. Even though my efforts haven't helped my child, I am obsessed with finding and doing the one thing that would help him see the errors of his ways and help him change. Why is he doing this to me? He's running and ruining my life.
The counselor agreed the problem with Alyssa's son was painful, upsetting, and required action. But the counselor also said the problem didn't have to run and ruin Alyssa's life. You haven't been able to control your son, but you can gain control of yourself, he said. You can deal with your own codependency. I chose the preceding examples because they represent a variety of experiences. That illuminates a point that needs to be made. No single example illustrates the typical codependent or his or her experience. Codependency is complex. People are complex. Each person is unique, and each person's situation is different. Some people have extremely painful experiences with codependency. Others don't, and may be only mildly affected. Each codependent has a unique experience born from his or her circumstances, history, and personality. Yet, a common thread runs through all stories of codependency. It involves our relationships with other people, whether they're alcoholics, gamblers, sex addicts, overeaters, or normal people. Codependency involves the effects these people have on us and how we, in turn, try to affect them. And that brings us to my definition of a codependent. A codependent person is one who has let another person's behavior affect him or her and who is obsessed with controlling that person's behavior. Codependency involves a habitual system of thinking, feeling, and behaving toward ourselves and others that can cause us pain. These behaviors can lead us into or keep us in destructive relationships that don't work. These behaviors can prevent us from finding peace and happiness with the most important person in our lives, ourselves. These behaviors belong to the only person each of us can control, the only person we can change, ourselves. These are our problems. But having these problems doesn't mean we're bad, defective, or inferior. Some of us learn these behaviors as children. Other people learn them later in life. We may have learned some of these things from our interpretation of religion. Some women were taught these behaviors were desirable feminine attributes. But wherever we learned to do these things, most of us learned our lessons well. Who's codependent? I am, and I'm not alone. An estimated 80 million people are chemically dependent or are in a relationship with someone who is. These people are probably codependent. People who love, care about, or work with troubled people may be codependent. People who care about people with eating disorders are probably codependent. In her book, Fat is a Family Affair, Judy Hollis wrote that one person with an eating disorder is typically contributing to 15 to 20 other people feeling codependent. Many people with eating disorders are codependent themselves. In an informal survey, I discovered at least 40% of the wives of alcoholics were obese, Hollis wrote. Many groups of people appear to be codependent. Adult children of alcoholics, people in relationships with emotionally or mentally disturbed persons, people in relationships with chronically ill people, parents of children with behavior problems, people in relationships with irresponsible people, professionals, nurses, social workers, and others in helping occupations. Even recovering alcoholics have noticed they're codependent and may have been long before becoming chemically dependent. Codependents are everywhere. Having a personal or professional relationship with troubled, needy, or dependent people is not the only common denominator for codependence. A second, more common denominator seems to be the unwritten, silent rules that usually develop and govern relationships. These rules discourage the good things that contribute to healthy relationships. A list of good qualities in a relationship includes discussion about problems, open expression of feelings, direct, honest communication, realistic expectations such as being human, being vulnerable, or being imperfect, trust in other people and oneself, playing and having fun, and rocking the delicately balanced family boat through appropriate growth or change. Rules that discourage these qualities are common to alcoholic families, but can emerge in other families too. Now that you have a definition and overview of what codependency is, let's look at some of the specific characteristics of codependence. These include caretaking, low self-worth, repression, obsession, controlling, denial, dependency, poor communication, weak boundaries between people, lack of trust, anger, sexual problems, and others. Let's start with caretaking. As part of caretaking, codependents may think and feel responsible for other people, for their feelings, for their thoughts, for their actions, their choices, their wants, their needs, well-being, lack of well-being, and for other people's ultimate destiny. Caretakers anticipate what other people need. They also may find themselves saying yes when they mean no. They do things they don't really want to do. They do more than their fair share of the work. And they do things for other people that other people are capable of doing for themselves. Caretakers may not know what they want and need, or, if they do, they tell themselves that what they want and need is not important. They usually try to please others instead of pleasing themselves. Due to their low self-worth and low self-esteem, codependents tend to blame themselves for everything. They pick on themselves for everything, including the way they think, feel, look, act, and behave. They think they're not good enough. They think their lives aren't worth living. so they try to help other people live their lives instead. They also tend to believe that other people couldn't possibly like or love them. Many codependents suffer from repression. They push their thoughts and feelings out of their awareness because of fear and guilt. They become afraid to let themselves be who they are. They appear rigid and controlled. Obsession also may be a major part of codependency. Codependents tend to focus all their energy on problems and people. They worry a lot, and they even lose sleep over problems or other people's behavior. They tend to check on people, trying to catch them in acts of misbehavior. Many codependents are controlling. They've lived through events that were out of control. They've lived with people that were out of control. This has caused the codependents sorrow and disappointment. They become afraid to let other people be who they are. They become afraid to allow events to happen naturally. Many codependents think they know best how things should turn out. They think they know best how people should behave. They try to control events and people through helplessness, through guilt, through coercion, threats, advice giving, manipulation, domination, and hundreds of other ways. After listening to these characteristics and examples, do you think any of these apply to you or someone you know? Think about it. Denial is another common characteristic of many codependents. Codependents tend to ignore problems or pretend they aren't happening. Codependents pretend circumstances aren't as bad as they are and that things will be better tomorrow. They get depressed or sick. They become workaholics. They overeat. And then they pretend those things aren't happening either. Codependents tend to believe lies, and they lie to themselves. Many codependents suffer from dependency. They don't feel happy, content, or peaceful with themselves, so they look for happiness outside themselves. They latch onto whomever or whatever they think can provide happiness. They feel terribly threatened by the loss of anything or person they think provides this happiness. They center their lives around other people, and then they try to prove they're good enough to be loved. Many don't believe they can take care of themselves, so they stay in relationships that don't work. Codependents frequently have poor communication skills. They blame, threaten, coerce, beg, bribe, and advise. They don't say what they mean, they don't mean what they say, and often they don't know what they mean. They have a difficult time expressing their emotions honestly, openly, and appropriately. Weak boundaries are another problem area for codependents. They frequently say they won't tolerate certain behaviors from other people. Then they gradually increase their tolerance until they tolerate things they said they never would. They complain, blame, and try to control while they continue to let others hurt them. Codependents lack trust. They don't trust themselves. They don't trust their feelings. They don't trust their decisions. And they don't trust other people. Often, they try to trust untrustworthy people. Many lose faith and trust in God, too. Anger can be a big problem for codependents. Many codependents feel very angry because they feel very scared and hurt. Many codependents live with people who feel these same emotions. Codependents have other problems with anger, too. Codependents are afraid of anger. They think people will leave them if anger enters the picture. So, instead of feeling angry, codependents cry a lot. They get depressed. They overeat. They get sick. They do mean and nasty things to get even. They act hostile, or they have violent temper outbursts. Codependents do other things with anger, too. They guilt and shame themselves for feeling angry. Then they feel increasing amounts of anger, resentment, and bitterness. But, in the end, codependents may feel safer with their anger than with hurt feelings. Some codependents have problems with sex. They're caretakers in the bedroom, having sex when they don't want to. They may have sex when they'd rather be held, nurtured, or loved. Some wish their sex partner would die or go away. Some keep having sex with their partner anyway, silently wishing the other person would sense what the codependent was feeling. Some consider having, or actually do have, an extramarital affair. Some other characteristics of codependence include being extremely responsible or extremely irresponsible. Some codependents become martyrs, sacrificing their happiness for causes that don't require this sacrifice. Codependents tend to find it difficult to have fun and be spontaneous. In the latter stages of codependency, codependents may feel lethargic, depressed, become withdrawn and isolated, abuse or neglect their children, and neglect other responsibilities too. Many codependents think about suicide. The preceding checklist is not all-inclusive. There are many traits that we have touched only briefly on here. And there are no certain number of traits that mean you're codependent. The decision about your codependency is up to you. What's most important is that you identify behaviors or areas that cause you problems and then decide what you want to do about these. Codependency is many things. It's a dependency on people, on their moods, behaviors, sickness or well-being, and their love. It's a paradoxical dependency. Codependents appear to be dependent upon, but they are dependent. They look strong, but they feel helpless. They appear controlling, but in reality, they're controlled, sometimes by an illness such as alcoholism. These problems are the issues that dictate recovery. Solving these problems makes recovery fun. Many recoveries from problems that involve a person's mind, emotions, and spirit are long and grueling. Not so here. Except for normal human emotions that we'd be feeling anyway, and occasional twinges of discomfort as we begin to behave differently, recovery from codependency is exciting. It's liberating. It lets us be who we are. It lets other people be who they are. It helps us claim our God-given power to think, feel, and act. Recovery feels good. It brings peace. It enables us to love ourselves and others. It allows us to receive love, some of the good stuff we've all been looking for. It provides an optimum environment for the people around us to get and stay healthy. And recovery helps stop the unbearable pain many of us have been living with. Recovery is not only fun, it's simple. Not always easy, but simple. It's based on a premise many of us have forgotten or never learned. Each person is responsible for him or herself. It involves learning one new behavior that we'll devote ourselves to: taking care of ourselves. Taking care of ourselves requires changing ourselves, our behaviors, our situation, and sometimes our relationships. How do you feel about changing yourself? What do you think would happen if you began to change? I'd like to talk about specific ideas for taking care of yourself. The first concept I'm going to discuss is detachment. Detachment is something we need to do frequently as we strive to live happy lives. It's the goal of most recovery programs for codependents. And it's also something we must do first as we begin our recovery. We cannot begin to work on ourselves. We cannot live our own lives. We can't feel our own feelings. And we certainly can't solve our own problems until we have detached from the object of our obsession. From my experiences and those of others, it appears that even our higher power can't do much with us until we've detached. Most codependents are attached to the people and problems in their environments. By attached, I don't mean normal feelings of liking people. I don't mean being concerned about problems. I'm not talking about feeling connected to the world. Attachment is becoming overly involved, sometimes hopelessly entangled. Attachment can take several forms. We may become excessively worried about and preoccupied with a problem or a person. We may become obsessed with people and problems in our environment. We may try to control people and problems in our environment. We may react to people and events. We may become emotionally dependent on the people around us. Or we may become caretakers, rescuing and enabling the people around us, thereby firmly attaching ourselves to their need for us. There are many problems with these forms of attachment. Over-involvement of any sort can keep us and the people around us in a state of chaos. If we're focusing all our energies on people and problems, we have little energy left for the business of living our own lives. And there is just so much worry and responsibility in the air. If we take it all on ourselves, there's none left for the people around us. It overworks us and underworks them. Furthermore, worrying about people and problems doesn't help. Worry doesn't solve problems. It doesn't help other people, and it certainly doesn't help us. It's wasted energy. Dr. Wayne Dyer wrote in his book, Your Erroneous Zones, the following: if you believe that feeling bad or worrying long enough will change a fact, then you're residing on another planet with a different reality system. Out of habit, some of us may have developed an attitude of attachment, of worrying, reacting, and obsessively trying to control. Maybe we've lived with people and through events where doing these things kept things in balance, or at least temporarily kept things from getting worse. And then we just kept on doing these things. Maybe we're afraid to let go, because when we let go in the past, terrible, hurtful things happened. Maybe we learned it's safer to stay attached. But let's look at the rewards from detachment. The rewards are great. Serenity, a deep sense of peace, the ability to give and receive love in self-enhancing, energizing ways, and the freedom to find real solutions to our problems. We find the freedom to live our own lives without feeling so guilty about other people, without feeling so responsible for them. Sometimes detachment even motivates and frees people around us to begin to solve their problems. We stop worrying about them, and they pick up the slack and finally start worrying about themselves. What a grand plan. We each mind our own business. I've known many people who have chosen to live with serious problems. Problems like an alcoholic spouse who never sobered up, a severely handicapped child, or a teenager hell-bent on destroying himself through drugs and criminal behavior. These people learn to live with and in spite of their problems. They grieved for their losses. Then they found a way to live their lives with enthusiasm, with peace, and with a true sense of gratitude, rather than in resignation, martyrdom, and despair. They took care of their responsibilities. They gave to people. They helped people. They loved people. But they also loved themselves. They held themselves in high esteem. They didn't do these things perfectly or without effort or instantly, but they strived to do these things, and eventually they learned to do them well. When should we detach? When we can't stop thinking, talking about, or worrying about someone or something? When our emotions are churning and boiling? When we feel like we have to do something about someone because we can't stand it another minute? When we're hanging on by a thread and it feels like that single thread is frayed? When we believe we can no longer live with the problem, it's time to detach. You'll learn to recognize when detachment is advisable. A good rule of thumb is this: you need to detach most when it seems the least likely or possible thing to do. Let me tell you a story. a true one. One night about midnight, my telephone rang. I was in bed and wondered, as I picked up the receiver, who was calling me at that hour. I thought it had to be an emergency. In a way, it was. It was a stranger. She had been calling various friends all evening, trying to find some kind of consolation. Apparently, she hadn't been able to find it. Someone had finally suggested she call me. Immediately upon introducing herself, the woman exploded in a tirade. Her husband used to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. He had separated from her, and now he was seeing another woman because he wanted to find himself. Furthermore, before he left her, he had been acting really crazy and didn't go to his meetings. And she wondered, isn't he acting crazy now by dating a woman who's that much younger than he is? She went on and on. Finally, she asked, don't you think he's sick? Don't you think he's acting crazy? Don't you think something should be done about him? That could be, I replied, but obviously I can't do it, and neither can you. I'm more concerned about you. What are you feeling? What do you think? What do you need to do to take care of yourself? Now I'm going to say the same thing to you. I know you have problems. I understand that many of you are concerned about certain people in your lives. Some of these people may be destroying themselves, you, and your family right before your eyes. But I can't do anything to control those people, and you probably can't either. If you could, you probably would have done it by now. What do you need to do to take care of yourself? Detach. Detach in love, detach in anger, but however you do it, strive for detachment. I know it's difficult, but it will become easier with practice. If you can't let go completely, try to hang on loose. Relax. Sit back. Now take a deep breath. The focus is on you. Is there a problem or person in your life that you're excessively worried about? If you didn't have that person or problem, how would your life be different? How would you be feeling and behaving? Spend a few minutes visualizing yourself living your life, feeling and behaving the way you would if you didn't have that problem. All is well. All is well for the moment. All is as it should be, and as it needs to be. All will be well, better than you think. So much of what we call codependency is simply our compulsive, urgent, desperate, and destructive reactions to other people and their problems. We don't have to react. We have options. We have choices. That's the joy of recovery from codependency. And each time we exercise our right to choose how we want to act, how we want to think, how we want to feel, and how we're going to behave, we feel better and stronger. Why shouldn't I react, some of you may ask? Why shouldn't I fight back? Why shouldn't I be upset? Why shouldn't I do something? The answer is this. The effect on you is a lack of peace, a lack of serenity, and wasted moments. This is your life. How do you want to spend it? You're not detaching for him or her. You're detaching for you. Chances are, everyone will benefit by it.